Marianne, thank you for joining us today and being part of the Plymouth State University Retirees Interviews. Or maybe we ought to call it a conversation that we're going to have.
I like the sound of that, and I'm happy to be here.
All right. I have a series of questions. You can pass on any of them, and you can take up as much time until you see my fingers starting to get eliminated. Are you ready to begin?
I'm ready.
Please state your full name.
Ann McGarry.
What position did you hold at Plymouth?
So I was Associate Professor of Environmental Science and Policy.
When did you come to Plymouth State?
I came in 2004 when the Center for the Environment was created.
And so that was right after 2003, which was Plymouth State University.
Right, it
That's
was
when
a
we-
university. That was part of the mission of creating the Center for the Environment.
You can pass on the next question, but most people have shared it if they can remember. What was your first year's salary?
Well, I was probably an exception because I had the status of a visiting professor because I was coming with Steve Call, who was hired as the director. So I had a small stipend, something like $3,000, to work, to do a special project for the president, Don Wharton. But that was okay because I was coming from the University of Maine and I still had grants. I'd been soft money. So I was used to soft money, and they said, all right, well, you're going to have to generate half of your own salary. So I thought, okay, that's fair. So I did, and then they did, I eventually moved in like 2 or 3 years into a full-time position.
Well, you just started to talk about your background. Can we go backwards for a little bit?
Sure.
You were at the University of Maine. Were you at another institution prior to?
Yes, oh, sorry, I never have it on. Okay, let me turn it off. Ooh. Okay,
It'll be fun if we don't edit it.
oh, that would be bad. That would be embarrassing. Please edit it. I should have thought to do that. So, yes, I earned my doctorate at University of Maine. Then the dean told me about a position opening up at University of Maine, Machias, which was joint between education and natural resources, which was perfect for me. And so I stayed there, got tenure there, and then I went to work I left, even though I was tenured, and went to work for state government, and then came back to the University of Maine, the Mitchell Center, and was soft money. So I was used to writing grants.
What lured you to Plymouth?
Well, because Steve Call, who I was married to at the time, became director.
He wanted to come, you wanted to come.
Yeah, I was thinking a small town to raise our daughter. I was intrigued.
I'm going to ask more questions about that a little bit. So when you came, was the population, can you remember the population of our students at Plymouth? Was it growing at that time?
I would say, I'm not certain in what years, but it did seem like it was growing for a bit. I mean, I sort of always thought the population I had heard of Plymouth, the town, was 6,000, and that included the students that lived on campus. So I know we did some growth, and then of course demographics started changing, and yeah.
Number of employees, do you have any idea when you first came here? Sometimes, this is my memory now, they would get all the newbies together, new staff, new faculty, do an orientation, some kind of an orientation. Was there a group of you?
There was a group of faculty. I don't remember in terms of other staff, but there were some other faculty members, and some of those, many have left, but like Becky Noel was part of that group, cohort group.
It's fun when you can say, wow, we're still here.
Yes.
We're still here.
Yes.
All right. So how many years were you employed at Plymouth State University so far?
Well, 2004, so almost like 18, would that be right, around?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then again, was there a certain title that you said you held when you came here?
Visiting professor.
That's different. That is
Right.
different for me. I have not heard that a lot.
I'm sure you probably haven't.
Yeah. And then responsibilities, you were teaching certain classes.
So originally I just helped create the environmental science and policy, well, the master's degree first, then the program, then the undergraduate degree, then the department, and then I became chair at one point.
Numbers of students warranted this to happen, I'm assuming, correct? You knew the numbers would come?
Yes, yep, because the creation of the Center for the Environment was really an initiative from partnerships and environmental organizations in this region. So there was strong urging for it to be created. And it was the right time because we were switching to becoming a university.
And there are other places throughout New England that this program is evident?
You mean a master's in environmental science and policy? Well, I'm not sure in terms of the master's. I think it was a unique degree because a lot of institutions, competitors have environmental studies, but I think there was real strength in the fact that we said science and policy because it wasn't just, I mean, there were two disciplines. It was interdisciplinary, but it was specific.
Because of my ignorance, if I graduated from your program, where would I look for positions?
Well, you could work for any natural resource agency, land conservation organization at the state, regional, state, federal level, and many of our students went on to work for USGS, Forest Service, Squam Lake Science Center. Once had like five of our MS students.
At one time?
I think so, yeah. There were a lot there.
Let's go backwards a little bit. When you first came to the campus, can you describe what your first years were like here for you?
Right. So, it was challenging to create something that hadn't existed before, and also because of my strong background in education, I had run part of my position at University of Maine in Orono, had been running a professional advising center in education with 200 undergraduates. So I ended up doing the science education credentialing for the state. And at one point, one of them was on probation. I don't really think it was always challenging because in the sciences, every certificate had a different credentialing: chemistry, biology, life science, earth science. So I had to do those, and it was a ton of work for not many students. And then eventually, I think PSU realized it's just too much work for a few students, and so they closed those programs. And then the K-8 programs kind of picked up some of the science emphasis.
You have your teaching schedule, full schedule. What else did you do, if at all, after hours, late afternoon? Were you on committees? Were there some extracurricular type of events that you joined, you started? I mean, definitely I got my stride when they created clusters, and I could go on quite a bit about that. But I was the advisor for the Faculty Senate, and that was extremely meaningful because that's unique at PSU. I learned a lot about the institution from that. I also then at one point was the representative to the Board of Trustees, and I saw a whole nother spectrum from that. I was on, I think, and some other committees, curriculum committee, but those two stand out in my mind. Enjoyable, meaningful for you?
Right,
yeah. I think so too. How about the student population? We've indicated a little bit. You think it changed? It kept increasing over time?
Well, I know that our major kept increasing because we, at one point, besides interdisciplinary studies, had the highest number of majors. And I took a lot of pride in that because we were a new major. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of, one of them, at PSU was we created an exit survey. And based on that exit survey, we really made changes to our program because we asked students, what was the most meaningful course? What are you missing? And so, for instance, I remember a student wrote an email to all the faculty and said, I'm getting a master's degree now in the Midwest, and I got a great education, and my ESP program is pivoting me ahead. I'm going to shorten my time in the master's. But one thing you all didn't cover, because it was just embedded in a few courses, was environmental justice. Well, now we've seen that swell in importance. Lynn Reitzman just gave the Sador lecture on that. That's the theme this year. So
so immediately I wrote back to the student, we corresponded, we shared resources. I started creating a module in all my different courses to make sure if students missed a course, they wouldn't miss that focus.
I'm gonna go backwards a little bit. It's a new question, but you talk about critical theory, classes that we've held at Plymouth, critical thinking classes that we've
Right.
held at Plymouth. Some people said, I still don't understand it, and other people say, I'm thriving using this. Can you help?
Well, so I was a big proponent of the interdisciplinary cluster model, project-based, involving outside partners. Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and habits of mind. Okay. And it was rejuvenating for me for lots of reasons, because one, it sort of unleashed creativity. You could go and launch anything. And I had some significant projects that are still ongoing that involved faculty from the sciences, English, arts, and so that just was so meaningful. I'm still giving presentations on that. That project's still evolving, growing, even though, you know, I'm now retired. And also, the fact that you suddenly were working with people from other disciplines that I had known were here since I've been here, but to actually work with them, and suddenly when you're in a cluster project, the competitiveness seemed to completely subside. It was so refreshing to suddenly be with people that wanted to create something new.
Same goals in mind,
Yeah.
even though we may want to get there a different way. That's
Yeah,
exciting.
I mean, it was pretty seamless working on those cluster projects.
Perfect. What was it when you came here about the college, the town, or even the state that said, I've made the right decision to come here?
Well, for me, I'm originally from Colorado, the recreational amenities, which I completely take advantage of. So all the natural resources, which totally fits with what I teach. It was a great place to raise my daughter because it had sports, it had theater, you know, so it had the art, kind of a balance of arts and sports, and she did both. And she wasn't particularly initially talented in either, but when you play field hockey for 8 years, you develop some expertise. So she had a great experience here.
Sorry. During the time you've been at Plymouth State, the town of, what changes have you seen taken place?
Well, certainly, like I noticed the beautification of the campus, but I have to say that for 14 years I walked across the campus because I live within walking distance or rode my bike, and I always appreciated just how beautiful the campus was. It kind of reminded me of Dartmouth, which is where I got my undergraduate degree. But then when I started teaching the capstone for our majors, and I focused on forestry, and then we ended up identifying, with the help of Bartlett tree experts, all this 106 species on campus. We have this informal arboretum, which I have to pay tribute to Steve Sweetler, who was here for 33 years, choosing which plants. And now it's like this bonanza of resources. Every time I do another tree tour, and I've done 5 this fall for different classes. I did one for poetry, I did one for art, I did one for a gen ed class, I did another one, art of sustainability. So I learned something new every time, and now I heard Child Studies wants to have one, and so I can bring in children's literature, and we're going to have a little corner downstairs at the museum of the White Mountains, so I'm thrilled about that. And we can have the art of the students, we can have the poetry of the students, the research of the science students, so it's like this great, you know, interdisciplinary project.
Regardless of the windows, we look out and what do we see? The most incredible trees,
Yeah.
whether or not they're 2 feet away or they're over across the river in Holderness.
Right. So my goal is just for students they're only here 4 years, that they appreciate that. And I think I meet that mission when we go and look at one-of-a-kind fossil dawn redwood trees that they thought were extinct, you know, and students, there's just all kinds of cultural, historical
One of my
stories.
questions is, what contributions do you think you have given to the
So
town?
we were creating we were looking at the ecosystem services of trees. I mean, in terms of catching stormwater runoff, pollutants, of course now with climate change, storing carbon. And so we were gonna calculate with all the trees on campus the dollar value so we could appreciate those trees. And as a result, I started learning about Tree Campus USA, so we got that designation for PSU. We're the only campus higher ed in the state that has that. And then I realized nobody on physical facilities is licensed to use insecticides, pesticides, so that meant we could get B Campus USA. So we got both, and we're the only campus.
Ah, congratulations. That's exciting.
Yeah,
That's
so
exciting.
I want that to continue, and which is why I'm so active still since I retired and I still live in the town, because it's easy to do.
It's time for us to chat about some of the people that may have influenced you when you first came at Plymouth and along the way.
Okay, so I would have to say, like June Hammond Rowan, who was a administration position in the Center for the Environment. She was hired just months, I think, after I arrived, and she was so loyal to that organization and was until when she left. And so I want to recognize her. I also want to recognize Rochelle Lyons, who got her, I think she'll end up getting all 3 degrees from here. So she was a student, and then we co-teach now, and we did a field studies course in Acadia for 8 years for students, and that's definitely one of the most meaningful teaching experiences, because we cooked, researched, lived with the students for 8 days. We became like family.
8 days, but over 8 years.
Yep.
Is that what I heard?
Yep. So the day after graduation, which was rough, we would leave Sunday morning, and the most we ever charged student was $500. So students that couldn't afford to do a study abroad, many had never been to a national park before, so we $500. That included transportation, lodging, food, research equipment. We worked with the Park Service, science, doing citizen science projects. So I still am in touch with those students.
Who was the brainiac that came up with that incredible idea?
Well, Warren Tomkowitz, and I was going to mention him as well. I had a initiative. So I had a joint appointment at one point with the Hubbard Brook Research Foundation up the road, the experimental forest. So half my salary was from PSU and half of my salary was from Hubbard Brook. And so we had a conference, and Warren ended up connecting with at that time, the head of the Schoodic Educational Research Center, which is a part of Acadia. It was education and research. So Warren and Brian Middlecoff went the first year, and then I went with Warren, then Rochelle joined us, and then Rochelle and I did it after Warren retired. And then Warren and I also took a group of students on a sustainability green castle project to Italy, and that was superb. Yeah, that was that. So we divided the students into 4 teams. One looked at energy, one looked at conservation and recycling of water, one looked at permaculture, and we interviewed people in the small town where this little castle was. It had been privately owned and it was slated to be developed, and then somebody came in, and it was through the state compact that we got word of this about going, and so really with very little notice in the spring of 2013 we took a number of students over for the semester, and it was and then we gave a presentation about the castle and all of the projects, so that was pretty meaningful. And I took students, sea turtle tagging in Costa Rica. I took students to the Galapagos. I developed a course that was accepted as a Gen Ed diversity to the Colorado Plateau, because you have Hopi, Navajo, Ute, Mormon, Spanish, Caucasians, ranchers, and we worked with the National Science Foundation Bio-Regional Education Program, and I did that for a number of years, and we had amazing experiences on the Ute Reservation. A young man that gave us a tour, and he was about the same age as the students, and we dropped him off afterwards back on the reservation, and somebody said, "What's that really beautiful building?" He goes, "Oh, wouldn't you know, that's the prison." And then he described it in so much detail. He said, "Yes, I've been in there." And he had a child, and it was so impactful for the PSU students to hear that, and then and he had just been this guide for us, incredible.
Such rich experiences.
Yeah.
Here they're on this campus, but at the same time, they have opportunities to go here and
Yeah,
there
yeah.
and learn from.
Yeah. Yeah, I just feel like I really worked closely with the study abroad program. We had a program in Otago in New Zealand that then my own daughter went to. She didn't go to PSU, but I knew about it from PSU, so I said, yes, do it. Because it's the one time for students where they can legitimately be part of another culture and not be a tourist. And so I say, just do it. And it does, you can swing it financially, because you can get your tuition and financial assistance to do
I'm trying to
it.
think of my daughter, the first semester she was here, she was not on campus, she went abroad.
Yeah,
And that made a huge difference, similar to the experiences all your students are receiving. And she continues to fly
yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
When she was abroad at Limerick, I don't know how long the program went for, but she would spend her $50 to go to Europe for the weekend for one country. Then
Oh
she'd
yeah,
go to the other
that
country.
Ryanair, you could travel so inexpensively. Yeah, the Limerick program, I was signed up to do that right before, I was signed up to do it and then it closed.
So we only did it maybe for a handful of
Yeah,
years.
not that many, maybe 4 or 5 years.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Other people along the way that have supported you, or you thoroughly enjoyed working
Yeah,
with them?
so, yeah, Cheryl Shirley, I did not know her. And when I had the Forest to Forest Bicknell Thrush program, because these birds that are on the high peaks of New Hampshire and migrate mostly 90% of them to the island of Hispaniola, and she was sort of Central Latin American expert, she joined the project. And then because of that, when our cluster tourism, environment, sustainable societies formed, I'm not really sure how it worked out, but we both became co-administrators. And she's now my best friend, and I have so much respect for her because she is so ethical. She was tough when I worked with her at certain things. She had strong feelings, she wasn't afraid to express them or push where needed to be pushed. I just have tremendous respect for her.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fun. Let's switch to the town. How has the town changed over time since you came here during the past 15 or so years? Town of Plymouth.
Well, I knew that there was town gown issues, as there are in many places in the country, and I think I think it depended on the little that I know. I think the administrators had a large part in fixing that when they focused on that. So, for example, I clearly remember, because I would do the Jazzercise parade, the Christmas parade, and I remember the first year that Sarah Jane Steen was in it and had to run down the street or something because her shoes hurt, you know. But it was important for her to be seen and to do that. So, I think whenever the university did make effort, I think the town received it well. And as soon as I retired, I joined Plymouth Area Renewable Energy Initiative, which has tremendously grown. It's just this umbrella for all these great things. And I thought, well, I can be a liaison for students wanting to do internships. And I'm a big proponent of internships. And I joined D Acres Educational Farm and Homestead, because I used to take students there. And I thought, anything I can do to keep them alive during COVID. So I feel like now it's my turn to give back to the community, because I live here. So,
The best part.
yeah.
I have a comment to make. Oftentimes, I don't know if the students, when I initially learn of them, whether or not they feel giving back to a community is worthwhile. Is it valued?
Oh, yeah.
But now that they're required to get into my program and they have to do so much service work,
Right,
and it's wonderful on their resume, but then they'll say, I learned so much and I felt so good.
right.
That's
You
it.
always do, yeah. And I just want students to realize that towns don't just operate by themselves. A lot of these positions are volunteer. And if you want to live in a great community, Bill McKibben, the famous author, teaches at Middlebury on environmental issues, and someone said, well, you know, with all the problems, Bill, where on the planet would you want to live? And he said, well, where there's the strongest community, which means if you put energy to make your community strong, you can have the strong community and be anywhere.
Well said,
Yeah.
well said. Let's see, if you had a group of people that were vying for positions on campus, what might you say to them? Because of your background, the years that you've been here, I'll have to say your wisdom. what would you say to them to entice them to think strongly about accepting this position at Plymouth State University?
Well, I think it's challenging times in academia, but even with all the changes, there's so many rewards to reap if you can put the effort into it, and if you are dedicated, and you can create something you never imagined even. And you know, everybody has a story about something that didn't go their way at PSU or at any institution. The grass is never greener. And if everybody just realized that everybody has a story, nobody's been uniquely picked on, and then they would just get over it and move on and be productive.
Do you have a story? A story that you still remember from way back when? Something that excited you, you're happy, your heart pounds a little bit when you think of it? And then the other way is there a story that saddened you during your tenure at Plymouth? And you can pass.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about one program that I haven't yet mentioned, which also amongst like taking students to the Four Corners and taking students travel study into Acadia, I worked with the Pakistani Educational Leadership Institute for 7 years. And I led the environmental science week-long strand. And I remember this started, the very first year I was here, Jenny Berry said, you should get involved with this. I'm like, well, I can't just push my way in. It's all set. I don't want to be perceived that way. But yes, I'll like offer support and go take a look. And so then I did get involved and with Blake Allen. And it was hard for the university because it was after, you know, of course, 9/11 and profiling, and I remember there was the second year there was a bus going to New York City, and they said, "There's room on the bus. Do you want to go?" I said, "Yeah." I signed my daughter and myself up, and then I thought, "Well, wait a second. I don't know that they're not like, I don't know how they were chosen, or I was just fearful, and so I started to back out. Then I met them, and I'm like, of course I'm gonna still go. Is there still room? And so we went. And so many of them missed their own children that they just flocked around my daughter, and I never worried about where she was because they would just, they'd be on their long flowing robes. But I mean, these women, they couldn't even tell their own communities what they were doing, where they had gone because of the oppression of women in education. So I thought, I learned so much about resiliency and commitment to education for girls, and I still am friends with so many of them from Pakistan. And then I went to Pakistan and I thought, but it was amazing. And I think just 3 of us went. And it was supposed to be a reciprocal program, but they never thought it was safe for us to go there. So we finally did though. But I remember when we went to New York City and they said, is ground zero on the itinerary? And we said, no. And they said, well, we know you didn't all vote for George W. Bush, and we're not all suicide bombers. They were just really frank and direct, and I was like, I loved them for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was, but at the end, I think it was, and it became a line item in the U.S. State Department budget, which is kind of amazing for Plymouth State University. But I think there were issues from the administration about the expectations of support, and it was hard because there were some financial struggles, and so I don't really want to blame anybody or go into it. I think it's a shame that it ended, but what service we did for 7 or 8 years. Yeah.
And you grew all the way.
Oh, completely,
and
yes.
That's so exciting. And I can't imagine if I had your daughter here right now, what experience she might want to share because she was with you and having these kinds of experiences.
Yeah. She did an exchange with a student in India, which I'm sure that was facilitated by meeting them.
It's wonderful. What have we missed today? Is there something that you would like to share with our audience?
Oh, I do want to say that when Cynthia Cutting became director and curator of the Museum of the White Mountains, at one point that was my most favorite place to hang out on campus. She made it so inviting, and not just because I had this Bicknell Thrush exhibit, but probably because I thought, oh, I gotta go see everything. I just didn't want to miss anything. Every opening, one of the first things I did when I retired is go meet the new director, Megan Doherty. And so now we're going to have that little space that she created, which I never imagined, for our tree tours.
So I really want to thank Cynthia for her making it so user-friendly for faculty and students.
For the audience, we should note that Cynthia is no longer with us. She
Right.
took another position.
Right.
Mhm.
But she made my experience here richer.
Awesome.
Yeah. And also one time I was in the play, the Educational Theater Collaborative play with my daughter that Trish runs, and I think that's a huge service. I just loved that so much, being in that. My daughter did too, and my daughter tried out for 4 years and didn't get a part. And all that auditioning and failing was great for her,
I love
for
it.
persevering.
Mhm.
And then when she did, she was in 3 in a row, you know, so, yeah.
Hopefully you have videos, you have pictures.
Oh, yeah, I saved everything, yes. I was crazy in that way, yeah.
The half hour has flown by
Okay.
and more, so I'd really like to thank you for,
Yeah.
again, coming in and sharing your thoughts,
Yeah.
your memories.
I think I got everybody.
Please check it through, please check it through.
I think I did talk about most everything. Yep.
Maybe 30 minutes will not be enough in the future, I'm not sure of that.